right, everybody, welcome to our latest Live Motocross podcast as we talk all things SMX, MXGP, MXoN, and all off-season stuff with Jason Thomas. Obviously, firstly, thank you everyone for listening and supporting the site. We really appreciate it. We'd also like to thank our partners in 24MX, Dirt Store, Duke Silkaline, and Dragon Energy for all their incredible support, as without them, none of this would be possible. All right, welcome, JT. How's life? And thanks again for joining us after a pretty wild couple of weeks in the moto world.
Yeah, everything's good. It's feels like it's finally slowed down a tiny bit. You always have projects you need to work on. My focus shifts a little bit, but it is nice to actually be in Idaho where I live for more than kind of 48 or 72 hours at a time.
Absolutely, mate. It's been a pretty hectic year for you, that's for sure. The travel must sort of grind you down a fair bit. And I guess the last sort of stint was the MXGP and then the MXoN at Madeley Basin where the Aussies won. So I guess any reflections you've had over the last 2 weeks? There's been a lot going on, a lot of news, and obviously the racing was just superb, especially at the Nations. And obviously, and so many of the Aussie guys, and obviously Jet and Hunter Lawrence, you interview him pretty much every week. And then Kyle Webster's obviously a fly athlete. Really cool to have him winning as well. He stood up, did so well. He was at the Supercross that I was at on the weekend just as a spectator, and he was there and everyone was sort of mobbing him and congratulating him, which was really cool. But yeah, I guess, and obviously you've been good mates with Burner as well, so pretty special weekend for the Aussies. But just any sort of key takeaways from the last couple of weeks, mate, because it was definitely a busy one for you.
Yeah, I was thrilled for Burner. No doubt about that. I've been there many times, and I trained with him and practiced with him while he was preparing for that race before. I was actually doing my Supercross thing, and he'd be out doing motos on the motocross track, but we'd be back at the truck and the lounge area kind of talking about our thing. And I've spent so much time training, riding, bench racing, strategizing, hard times. When he broke his leg, when I had my ACL surgery, I spent most of my recovery at his house, and we've just been through a lot. So to see him not necessarily do it on the racetrack, but be a part of that, a huge part of that winning effort was, there was satisfaction for me from it, and I had nothing to do with it. So I can't imagine kind of what a culmination of a lot of frustration had to be for them. Like, kind of just, not that they're gonna keep trying to go win it, but you can rest easy knowing that you accomplished it that one time. And that's such a big thing, is like, until for just a nation to never have won that, and you look at the talent that's come through, you just don't have that hanging over the top of your head anymore. So that was really cool. My experience was, let's go back to leaving SMX. Everybody was kind of high-fiving, like, hey, we're done. Congratulations. Great season, time off. And I knew that this 2.5-week trip to Europe was kind of looming. So yes, I was celebrating with everybody, like, great season, and we're in Vegas and everybody wants to have a good time. But I didn't have this mission accomplished type feeling. It was like, this is fun, let's have a good time, but I need to start wrapping my head around the MXGP World Championship that's going to conclude, and I need to be on my game for that and understand all the math and situations and how that's all going to play out. When they were leaving China, everything changed, right? And I was going immediately into that scenario. And then a week in Europe before Motocross the Nations. And for me to be able to be alongside Paul, not only for MXGP, which is a thing in itself, but Motocross the Nations it's the most prestigious race on earth, right? Like, the only other race you can put up against it is really Anaheim 1 in our world. And, I've been a part of that A1 experience. I get to be a huge part of the Motocross the Nations side of it. So it's something I take very seriously and want to prepare for and do the best job I can. Not really necessarily for myself. Of course, I want to do things and hopefully the right people see that and think I'm doing a good job, but respectfully for what that event deserves, I need to do the best job possible. Like, I need to really give everything I possibly have, because that is what that race, it's the respect that it deserves. I don't really know a better way to put it. So in hindsight of all that, like, I felt like I did the best job I could. I know that I was just, left there with an overwhelming sense of gratitude for being a part of it. And also looking at the future of the sport, whether you're talking about the Coonans or Kaida Wolf or Jet Lawrence coming over from Australia. He's only 21. The state of American motocross, Hayden Deegan, who wasn't there, but he will. I truly believe he'll be there in Ironman next year. We're in a really good place, right? Like, we have some incredible established talent, the guys like Tim Geiser and Prado, which we will get into on this podcast in depth. But you look at globally the mix of incredibly young talent that's coming into the limelight, and you still have the likes of Eli Tomac and all these guys that are kind of the old guard in the establishment that are still wildly capable, the Cooper Webbs and all these guys that they don't care about the young guys coming up, right? And that's what makes for epic championships and epic, entertainment is these young guys coming in thinking they're gonna take over the world, and the old guys that have been there and done that saying like, yeah, no, you're not. Like, meet the new boss. It's the same as the old boss, right? So I just left there kind of going, man, the sport globally is in a great place right here. There is both sides of the ocean, include the Australian contingent that, they're off chasing dreams around the world, many of them. But there is a lot of talent all converging into their prime at the same time. It's a pretty magical time I think we're entering. So, and you look back, it wasn't always like this, right? Like, some of these riders get on a run, like Villapoto goes on a 4 championship run, and there are times when the racing almost gets boring, and who's going to win. It's not exciting. I don't think we're there, right? Like, Jet has the capability to do that. He absolutely does. But I think 2025 is going to be a special year because there's going to be a lot of healthy people solidified in their team. They know what to do, and whether it's MXGP or here, I think the championships are pretty wide open. So that's kind of where I left. Just like, I was on the plane and thinking about all the things you see and hear and these experiences I get, and I was like, man, we're in a good spot globally in this sport right now. And I don't think that I'm qualified to kind of make that declaration. It's just one man's opinion. But I've been going to these races for 40 years, and you get a really good sense of kind of where things are. So I was very happy with kind of just taking a big overarching view of things. Pretty positive.
Oh, it's absolute. The sport's in a really great place. And I guess before we touch on some of that stuff, I guess, how did you find the pressure? And I guess you have high expectations for everything you do. And was the commentary, on the nations, it's a big stage to be on, mate, going out to the world. And, I guess there's so much sort of preparation and everything you got to go on there, mate. But you really did do a brilliant job. And I guess, the insight and knowledge you guys have, you and Paul, it's really sort of invaluable, and it really elevates the viewing experience, everything from line selection, mindset, conditions, how to navigate so many different things whilst you're trying to call the race. It's definitely easier said than done. Some of the fans are pretty quick to criticize anyone that's doing that job, but it's definitely easier said than done, isn't it, mate?
It is. And for me, the most challenging part, there are the challenges that everybody's going to face in that role. It's speaking concisely, hitting your marks and getting your thought across exactly how, like all of us, when you're sitting around, you're watching a race, you have these thoughts in your head. Well, when you're sitting in your living room or wherever you happen to watch your racing, yeah, okay, you can talk about the race really clearly because there's no pressure. You're not in front of, hundreds of thousands of people aren't watching you and criticizing the things you say and all these things. It's really easy. But those challenges are going to be the same for everybody, whether it's myself or Ricky Carmichael or James Stewart or Jason Wygant, Paul May, take your pick. Everybody's going to face that challenge. The unique challenge, I think, for me is to keep up with and learn rider tendencies that I don't see every weekend, right? So like for me, learning Jet and Webb and Tomac, that's easy because I see them all the time. And I've been watching them week in and week out do, I don't know how many laps they do on a weekend, 100 maybe on a Saturday, something like that, 80, 90. I watch every one of them, right? So I know these guys inside and out. I know what they're good at. I know what they're not good at. I know where their bikes are strong and not, and how they like their bikes. And I know all that stuff just because I've watched it. I don't have to have someone tell me. It's just been repetitive, viewing of it and learning and studying. But for me to jump into MXGP and a race like Motocross of Nations, I have to go do my homework. I need to really study MXGP TV. I need to really look closely on the weekends and kind of see where are their differences as the track's changing. Is that working for them or against them? And is this guy in better shape than that guy? And what conditions favor them? And all those things, I feel like I've come a long way and I felt prepared for it, but it's not as easy. And those are I think the unique challenge for anyone jumping in. And there have been lots of people do it in the past, Jeff Emig, and lots of people have come before me to be in those MXGP rounds from stateside. And I think that's, if you don't do your homework, if you don't prepare, I believe, and maybe not everybody would notice it, but for someone who's paying attention, I think you'll get exposed. I think people will know that you don't understand the nuance of each rider, and you don't know their tendencies. You don't know if they're dealing with an injury or they really dislike their motorcycle or whatever, right? Like all those things are what I think my job is to bring to the public, is share all those things. And like, hey, this guy's laboring at the 25-minute mark because he has a torn ACL and he's been holding all of his weight up with his left leg and now his right leg's tired, and all those little things I think add to the broadcast. That's what I find the most challenging is staying on top of all that stuff. And I do my best. When they're in China, I try to ask around, like, hey, what happened? What was going on? All the little things, like, yeah, I have the results. I watched the race, whatever. But what did I miss? Like, if what went on that may be the subtle difference that can, because I truly believe that winning oftentimes is in the margins. Like all these guys are so damn good. What are the little things that are the difference between doing really well and not? So that, yeah, anyway, long-winded way of explaining. I just have to really kind of lock in and if I want to do it correctly, you really have to do the work behind the scenes to make that show up on broadcast Sunday.
Yeah, it's such a good insight you have there, mate. Another thing that I guess people overlook as well is that Paul's used to doing that by himself the majority of the year. You obviously come to a few MXGP rounds as well, but that's another thing you got to tackle is that dynamic with him. It's almost got to be telepathic, and you got to read the cues, signals, when to speak, because it's probably not as easy as it looks to slot in when Paul's just used to doing it solo most of the time. So that's another thing you got to adapt to.
Yeah, it is, and he is such a wealth of knowledge. I mean, he can, his recall is second to none, right? Historically, and everybody can remember. Well, last week, remember when this? Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about he can think back on 2008 at Lockett and say this guy did this and he finished there and this is what happened. He has tremendous recall on that stuff, and I guess to be fair, I do, and Jason Wygant does, and things like that in Supercross and Motocross. We can kind of do the same thing, but for me, I'm up against a dictionary when it comes to information on the sport of MXGP. So I need to make sure that I know it inside and out as much as I possibly can, because you don't have time when you're in this broadcast, right? It's got to be instantaneous and instinctive. You don't have time to fumble through notes and kind of figure out, well, this guy did this and that. And, like the moment's already passed by then, and you either nailed it and you had something to add that was insightful, or you didn't. There is no pause button. There is no shuffling through papers to find what you're looking for. So that's the tough part, right? Like you can't fake it. And so I'll give you an example. We have in SMX we have Quentin Fowler and sometimes Brett Smith, but there are research assistants or statisticians. They have so much data on hand for us, and they provide it for us. And they're sitting in the broadcast booth with Ricky or James and Weege, whoever is in there. They're in there with them, and they can provide as much information as they possibly need to, especially like if there's a commercial or a break and they have a question, boom, they can feed that information. The problem is if you're not prepared, you don't have time. Like there's no time to get to them. Hey, this is a question I have. I need this information. Get it back to me. Now we'll find a way to get in it. Like there's no time for any of that. So they can provide a lot of information, but if you don't absorb it on your own, and I'll give you a really obscure example. For a lot of people, when you go to high school, you can pay attention in your class, right? And whatever they cover in class is what's going to be on the exam or on the test you have to take. When you go to higher, any sort of higher learning, university, college, you're expected to go out and learn all that on your own outside of class reading, and you have to go the extra mile to learn all that stuff, because there's going to be, I don't know, 70 or 80% of the material that's not covered in class that's going to be on these exams. It's kind of the same way for racing. Yes, you can be provided with all the information in the world, but if you don't take the time to learn this stuff inside and out and be able to recall it in a moment's notice, it's almost useless, because there's going to be an opportunity to drop that in, a reference to, hey, it was muddy at, 2 years ago at this same racetrack, and so got, fourth when he typically gets like 12th. Watch for that today. Like, he may have a breakout race because it's the exact same conditions. If you don't have that ready, you're gonna miss the moment, right? So that's, again, I keep coming back to the same point. It's all about just preparation, and for MXGP specifically, that's what I've really tried to lean into is making sure that I'm doing the series a service by being there, not just like, hey, yeah, let's talk about the race. Cool, man. That guy's going really fast. Like, that's not helping anything. Like adding things that the viewer doesn't know. That's, to me, where you're getting value out of the broadcast.
It's really interesting to hear your thoughts on it, mate. And yeah, it's a really good combination of knowledge and adding value, and the execution as well, speaking clearly. And you guys definitely did that really well. And I guess onto the racing now, obviously Lucas Coonan, we had a good chat about him last time as well. And obviously Kai de Wolf as well, obviously doing the Supercross, a little bit of a training run there. And he raced against Hurlings at a Valkenswaard Dutch finale on the weekend, and they split moto wins, which is pretty cool. I guess it's a bit of an issue for MXGP in some ways. You got de Wolf looking, you got Harrop looking, you got so many guys, obviously Prado's going, Coonan brothers are going. So there's so many guys that sort of looking towards that American sort of dream, aren't they? So it's an interesting issue for MXGP to tackle. And I guess Hurlings isn't getting any younger. He'll probably have a few more years, just like Fevra, Siwa. So filling in that void of, I guess, talent, depth of talent is going to be a really interesting subplot, which sort of brings us back to the point where you were saying 2025 is going to be another special year. You're absolutely spot on, because these talents are all still there. All the experienced guys, the youth is coming through. So it's definitely an exciting time in the moto world, isn't it? But it's definitely a gap that's going to need to be addressed at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a precarious thing, because, when I was at MXGP a lot this year, I don't know that I would say maybe a decade, and I wasn't going to MXGP very much back then, but I was racing in Europe at that time. I don't know that I've heard as much chatter from riders about going to America that I did this year. De Wolf wants to go. Coonans, I think, are going in 26. And you just heard it from rider after rider. Mikkel Hara sounds like he's trying to get to America as well. I don't know what the reasoning is. I don't know why all of a sudden now, but these kids are wanting to make that move. And I don't know if it's because the SMX, there's this huge purse with the playoffs. I don't have a way to pinpoint it, but there is definitely a kind of a change there. There's a change in sentiment about where these guys want to go. And I think that, in front, and the people with influence there, David Longo, I think they have to get in front of this. And I'm not telling them anything they probably don't know already. They certainly know much more than I ever will about this situation. But from an outsider looking at it, I'm like, something's got to be done here. Like, whether that has to be from the OEM side, like conversations there, but there's a chance for a lot of talent that they have groomed from EMX on through that could depart before they ever make it to the prime time. That could absolutely happen. And I know they do not want that to happen. So that's going to be really interesting. And if all those guys leave, you're right, it will leave a void. And it won't be it for the short term. It'll be fine, because there's plenty of talent, but you don't realize there's a problem until there's a problem, right? Like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, guys like Geiser, Febvre, Stewart, all these guys are too old. They're exiting, and you don't have that gap behind them. Like, you don't have the natural flow of talent, because the Coonans and de Wolf and Langenfelder and those guys, it should be their time now. Like, they should be rolling in, and the ones that are pushing the old guard out and vying for world championships. That's the natural flow of things. And I have thought that, In Front and Ustream before them had done a great job of stemming that tide. Because if you look back, and the Roxons and the Muscans and all those guys, Ferrandis, they left. they were next, right? Like those guys should have been MXGP world champions, or at least in the fight for it. They didn't stay. They left and went to America. Well, the OEMs, to their credit, got together and said, hey, we got to pay these guys. If we don't pay these guys the wage that they can get in America, they're going to leave. And I'm sure that Ustream and Infront had conversations with them like, hey, let's all come together and find a way to keep talent here. And you can see it. You can see it in Motocross of Nations, how competitive they are. You can see how guys like Tim Geiser, they all had their opportunities to lead. Jeffrey Hurlings. How many years did we hear these guys were like, they might go to America. They're going to ride Monster Cup. They're going to try these things. Maybe they're going to America. Well, they never went. They always stayed. But now with Prado leaving, that's a big one. Like that is, I mean, that's a back-to-back MXGP world champion departing for America. You hear DeWolf he's testing in America in the next couple of weeks. Harp is testing in America. And the Coonans, I think, are already a done deal, right? They're going to race in 25, but I believe in 26, they're a done deal to go to America. I don't know. Like I don't want to say it's a scary proposition because I don't have really a vested interest, but I would be concerned if I were the powers that be about that transition and just the change in decision making. Before it was like, nope, we're going down the MXGP path. There's millions of dollars to be made here. You can stay here. This is what you specialize in. Everything's pushing forward. And now something has shifted. I don't know if Prado was the one that made these guys see things differently, or maybe they're looking at SMX playoffs and going, that guy just made 300 grand, right? Like Vial. Look at a guy like Vial, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in a 3-week span. Those guys in Europe don't have an opportunity to do that. Like that does not exist for them. So something's happened there. It's going to be interesting to watch. But I don't think it's been this way in at least a decade. The way it's kind of just a momentum swing to the other side where a lot of people are looking to the west.
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic to follow because there's going to be a lot of moves and they might have to see what they can do to keep some of these guys as well because, Vial's just a perfect recent example. Like you said, he's headed over there. He's already got a Supercross title in the 250 class and he's holding his own in SMX and he's always been a great outdoor rider. But I guess from your perspective, what are the motivations you're hearing? Obviously, there's so many positives of going to America, but you got the money, the fame, the exposure, the lifestyle. It's sort of that all in moto lifestyle. They obviously get treated like kings as well, which they do anyway for the most part, but there's that sort of chasing that dream. It sort of adds another carrot to chase in their career as well. Like for Prado, won 2 world titles, and obviously that most recent one was really special on home soil. And then the next box to check for him is America. So what are you sort of seeing of the motivations of these guys to do it?
Yeah, I think you nailed most of them. I think it's the money is big, right? So for a guy like Tom Vial, he rides for Red Bull KTM, and it's not a coincidence that Lucas Myrtle is his agent. Lucas is very big on placing his riders onto teams where they can do their own contracts, right? So Tom Vial was able to go out and get his own helmet deal, his own gear deal, his goggles, all that stuff, where a team like Monster Energy Pro Circuit Kawasaki, Star Racing Yamaha, whoever, they don't, right? They sign one number, and that's your deal, and this is all you get. And so I think Vial has open the door. Like they're looking, I'm sure they talk, right? And they're like, hey, what do you make? And they're like, yeah, I can do this. And my bonuses are this. And I have all these sponsors that are all paying me instead of paying the team. That's a big difference, right? I think the glamour of it, like there's something about Supercross. There just is, right? Like Supercross is just more glamorous. And I'll give you an example, like talking to Calvin Vlanderen last year, he went over in January and he's like, oh my God, like he had never been. He was like, I've never seen anything like this before, right? And those comments, I think, start to take hold, especially on young and impressionable kids. They hear things like that and they're like, that's where I want to be. Like I'm still young enough where I can position myself anywhere. That's where I want to be. And then finally, I think the weather is a big part of it, right? If you're telling a kid you can live in Florida or California and the mean temperature for the year is, in Fahrenheit, I don't know, 70 degrees, doesn't rain a lot. You don't ever have to ride the mud and muck of Lommel ever again in the winter. You don't have to just hammer yourself to death in the winter in Belgium and Netherlands. I think that's a pretty attractive proposition for a lot of these kids. So you tell me, more money, better weather, and more like fame and glory. Unless you're a true traditionalist of MXGP and you believe that like there is nothing more pure, and there are those people. Unless you're one of those, it's a pretty attractive offer to move to America if you have the right situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. There's some great points you made in there. And I guess with that Supercross string to your bow, like you've said, mate, obviously Prado is adding that to his, and he showed what he could do off a small base, really impressive last year. And that's a lot of the talk about that Kawasaki deal. But I guess it gives you, from your perspective, you did so many off-season races, it can really lengthen your career because, making money in the sport's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So to do what you love and what you're good at, to do that as long as possible. You look at guys like Brayton and Dean Wilson, he was awesome on the weekend at Australian Supercross, but, you can really sort of bump out that bank balance, and you got WSX now, you got Paris, you got Oz Supercross, the AUSX Open, where the Lawrence brothers and Webb will be at, and there's money to be made if you want to chase it in some ways, isn't there, mate? So I guess it makes that transition, from life after moto, which is really a difficult one, which is one you've actually done really well transitioning into, mate, with your commentary and the media work, but a lot of riders struggle with that, so it can sort of just gradually ease you into retirement rather than going from racing, say, AMA or MXGP to nothing. So it's really good having that Supercross string into your bow, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of money to be made. You think about a rider like Kai de Wolf, right? He wants to go test Supercross. Well, why would he want to do that? Well, outside of moving to America, even if you said, if Pit Buyer called Kai and said, you're not going to America, we're going to keep you here. We're going to make sure you're paid very well to stay here because we need you to be the quote unquote next MXGP champion, right? Like we need you here. So we're going to make sure that you're paid well. Okay, cool. So why would he ride Supercross? Why would he test Supercross? Well, because he can go to races like Paris. He could go race the AUSX Open. He could go race, Geneva if they decide to have it. There are races all over. And he could add easily, he's MX2 world champion, easily 100K to his end of year, earnings every single year. If he could just get proficient, he doesn't have to win the race. He just has to be good enough where he's not going to embarrass himself and he's not going to hurt himself. If he can do those things and show up and perform, it could be more than that. I'm just saying, I guarantee you he can make $100,000 between a few races, being the name he is, and he's never raced Supercross. All these people want to see him. Races like Paris and AUSX Open, like they have huge budgets, right? AUSX Open is funded by the Australian government in certain ways. Like they have the tourist department. Like there's a lot of money handed out in different directions. And for some of these guys that they get nothing. I don't know what Kai de Wolf makes, but I know MX2 is not, they don't make a ton. They don't make crazy money. So you're telling me that like sharpen your skills a little bit and you can add an extra $100,000. Like I think that would sound pretty good to Kai de Wolf about now. So in any scenario, regardless of what your long-term plans are, to not have some sort of Supercross prowess that you can take an off weekend and make an extra $20,000 is absolute lunacy to me. There's no reason for it. Now, there are downsides. Like you always have, in any race, you can hurt yourself. Like think about Roman Febvre getting hurt at Paris, right? Like that really set him back. That was a big deal. So there is that risk, right? And I would argue that if you're Febvre, he's a racer and he wants to win, right? If you know Supercross is not where you're going to pattern your career, then maybe kind of let things unfold. Don't take big risks. Don't like win or die trying kind of attitude with something like that. So I don't know. I'm sure Febvre didn't go there thinking he was going to hurt himself. No one does. But again, man, I think the risk, you're racing a motorcycle for a living. There's always going to be risk, but I look at any of those guys like, Hurlings makes so much money that it kind of doesn't matter. Like he makes millions of dollars a year. So kind of who cares? But these other guys, they don't. And they could be making a lot more money than they do. I mean, I used to make half of my income in 2 or 3 months doing just this very thing. So yeah, I don't know. It's crazy to me. Maybe if I had a conversation with them, they would tell me why. Right. And okay, example, a couple podcasts ago, we were talking with Adam Sterry, right? And he's just like, nope, I'm done. Like, I will not race again until probably like February. I'll take my time off. I'll do a proper off season. No Supercross, no nothing. that's not for me to decide. He's a grown adult. Like, he's a established professional motocross racer. He can make his own decisions. I just hear it and I'm like, you're crazy. Like, that's literally what I think. I'm like, you're crazy. You could make so much money. And I'm not saying it would go well right away. Like, it's not easy, but he is a very talented racer. He could figure it out. So racing British Arena Cross, racing, AUSX Supercross races. Like, I used to win German. I won a ton of German Supercross races, but it was like 10K a weekend. Like, I don't know. That's pretty decent money for most people, right? And I would guess for Adam, like, most of the races he's going to, he's not making 10K a weekend, So I don't know. It's an interesting bench racing topic. Should they or shouldn't they? I just know the answer for me was always yes, I should.
Yeah, it's super cool insight, mate. It certainly opens some doors. It's like risk reward balance, isn't it? And you look at someone like Jed Beaton, who's had a great MX2 career, and then he had the MXGP 1 year, and it just got the injury scuppered him after a really good first round. I believe he got 6th overall on that F&H Kawasaki, and he did his first Supercross race in 9 years on the weekend in Australia.
Yep.
And he was in that top 5, and he still held his own. So you can see he's got all the talent, the skill, the judgment, the calculations. It takes him a little bit of time to obviously refine them. Obviously, on the first night, he said it wasn't quite how he wanted it, but by the second night, he was really good and felt quite comfortable. So, the scope is there for quick improvement, I guess, if you have the initial base. So that's like you were saying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, maybe I'm thinking it's too easy, but because I did it for so long and I had so much experience racing Supercross, and it's probably a little discouraging for these guys who are like a little intimidating. Like, hey, I've never really raced Supercross. I'm just going to jump in the deep end. But again, like, you look at where is most of the money situated in the sport, it's hard to say that it's not a lot around Supercross. Regardless of where you're at on the globe, there is just a ton of money wrapped into Supercross, and to not have that skill set as an arrow in your bow, like you said, it seems like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess on the topic of off-season races, obviously Justin Barsha race and the Western Beach race and getting 7th, obviously my boss Gareth and the team at RHL did a super job running that event. And obviously there was, 100,000 people went to it. So the fans definitely love those kind of things. Was that an ever interest to you doing something like that, mate? And I guess credit to him, because it certainly is brutal. And obviously Conrad Muse won, which was super impressive after that ankle injury. And I remember doing a podcast with Barsha leading up to Western to sort of promote. I think he was in the car on the way to SMX in Las Vegas, and he was saying he's moving to the Baker's factory then, which is really cool. But I guess he loves going to the UK, and he's quite a unique case. But it's another sort of big star having a door open to him just because of that, American fame and what he's done in his career and adding some star power. So, testament to him to give it a crack, I reckon. Was that something that you would ever be interested in?
I would have gotten my ass kicked so bad at any of those beach races. I don't think it would have gone well for me. Like, I know how to ride sand, but if you look at some of the sections where the bike's like stuck and I wouldn't have had any leverage, right? I'm not tall enough to manhandle the bike. It's like why I never did endurocross or any of those things, because those rock sections, if you're not really tall, you don't have really a chance. Like, you just don't. You can't maneuver the bike. You can't manipulate the bike. And I don't think it's a coincidence that like Cody Webb and David Knight and these huge guys are so good at that. Like, that is a big part of it. So was it ever interesting to me? Yeah. I thought it was really cool. I know what my limitations are and where I worked really hard to figure out where I was good and where I wasn't. And I tried to position myself around that. And I just knew I would have sucked. I would have been awful. And I got asked to do endurocross a lot. And I'm like, there's just no way. Like, I will not subject myself to that. So really cool race. I was thrilled that Conrad Muse was able to win. He wears fly racing. He has for a very long time. But yeah, for me as a racer, no, it was never something I seriously considered.
Yeah, it certainly looks like a brutal test, and just like a week after the Nations for Conrad. Yeah, so cool for him to do that. And I guess the last one before we sort of wrap this one up, mate, how's the excitement building towards, I guess, 2025 Supercross? It'll be around extremely quickly, really, won't it? So I guess we always say it, but it is stacked, isn't it, mate? Lawrence brothers, Tomac, Webb, AP, Barsha, Jason Anderson, Roxon, Jay Coop, Sexton, Prado, Mookie, Craig. Just getting a top 10 is going to be a super impressive achievement, really. And obviously Savachi will be back in that class as well on the Firepower Honda. So is there any excitement building, mate, or is it just a bit too far away still?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on Barsha too. I do think Barsha will go back and win that race. I do. This year, I think he was just kind of feeling it out. But I don't know if it'll be next year, the year after, the year after that, but I predict that Justin Barcia will be a winner of the Western Beach race eventually. So we'll see if I'm right or wrong in that assessment. But I know he wants to spend a lot of time there. His wife is British, so he's incredibly talented. He knows how to ride the sand, and I think he's kind of made it a goal of his, and I think he'll get that job done. But yeah, for America right now, it's really the only time where there's a true down period. This is like, if you were looking at American, like, is there an off season, a true off season where they're not testing, they're not really riding, they're not kind of locked in? It's right now. This is it. This is the most pure form of that. And if you look on Instagram, you'll see that. You'll see Chase Sexton in Hawaii. You'll see these guys really trying to like unplug a little bit. And this is their only time, because once November 1 picks up, or even honestly, the closer we get to late October, they have to start doing some testing, initial testing, so they can order parts for 2025. And it's not that it's back to business. They won't be just killing themselves on the racetrack, but they'll have to do some light testing. They'll have to spend some time on the bike. They'll have to do some things like that are a little bit more kind of back into the swing of things. But I really think the only person right now that is not in that mode is probably Jorge Prado. Like, I think Prado is the only one that, it's such a big transition. He's moving to America. He's switching teams. From what I understand, and I don't have this on authority, but what I've been told is he is riding the Kawasaki privately. And yeah, not where anybody could see it, not where he could get in trouble, not because there's a lot of contractual things there, right? And I'm not an authority on this. I don't know. I think he's the only one right now that's not in full off-season mode, because he has so many things to adjust to. I think he's probably riding right now where no one else really is. He's got to switch teams, got to switch personnel, get used to mechanics and technicians and a new motorcycle. And there's a lot there. It's not just the average, hey, you're switching teams, got to get used to a new bike. It's new everything. It's really like truly new everything. Because for his entire career, all he's ever raced is a KTM in some way, shape, or form, right? Like a gas. I mean, that gas was a red KTM. It was like, it was a full factory KTM with a red frame and red plastics on it. So for him, it's going to be a lot. It much more than last year. Last year, you'd be like, well, he did this last year. He came to him, yeah, but he was on the same kind of team, working with the same technicians. He could call his technicians in Europe and ask about settings, and they could send over the same setup, and he could get it really close to where he was, right? And I know he's on a production bike, but there was a lot of workarounds there. They weren't like, if he was, I would almost guarantee he was running parts that Sexton wasn't, just because he was probably more used to them. So I truly believe right now, if you were in Southern California, he's probably out riding in the middle of nowhere somewhere on a Kawasaki. Whatever, KTM would probably not like me saying that, but that's not for me to decide or get in trouble for. I just think that's the natural way of things. He's not out there promoting a Kawasaki. He's not, doing a disservice to KTM or anything like that. But yeah, he's got a big step. And if you've ever talked to Prado, like, he carries kind of this quiet confidence. It's not an arrogance. I don't believe it's an arrogance. But if you ever question if he believes he's the best guy or believes he's supposed to win, you kind of question him on it, you'll immediately like see it. Like, oh, there it is. There's the like stone cold killer inside him. Like, he kind of has this happy-go-lucky demeanor, and he's always smiling, but like underneath that, there is a really harsh competitor in there. And I've talked to him at times and been like, I immediately will see it. And you can see it in interviews sometimes, like when he talk about beating Jeffrey and some of his body language and some of the gestures he makes, like, you can see in there, like, he's not as kind of soft and mushy on the inside as one might think. And I think he feels the expectation and the pressure to be ready to go win in 2025. Maybe not in Supercross, but in motocross. And this window right now in October, kind of where I'm trying to bring it back full circle, this window gives him time to go test motocross right now, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But when November hits, he's going to be full Supercross mode. Like he'll be at the Cali test track. His contract will be up at some point, right? And he'll be able to be out in the public and be out motoing Supercross and be riding with Anderson every day and all the pro circuit boys and all that. That's going to happen. But right now, he can go test for next May and get a base setting. They can figure out what parts work, what parts don't. Hey, maybe we're way off. Like, we need to build a bunch of parts. Well, this gives them that time to go back to Japan, go build out what they need, start thinking about where they need to get with the motorcycle and get them ahead of the game before he needs to really hunker down on Supercross starting, probably November 1 or whatever contractually he can do. So it's, again, I'm probably saying 10,000 words when 100 would do. But I think the most interesting rider right now, October 16th is Jorge Prado, because he's probably the only one that's hard at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. It's going to be so cool to see his progress. And yeah, you're completely right what he says with his comments. He's very sure of himself, and you can tell he's got that fierce determination, and he's such a ferocious competitor as well. He doesn't mind those little cheeky digs, just saying sort of, I'm the man.
No, he doesn't.
A little flex on. But he's that good, isn't he? The skill's phenomenal on him, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those guys that I did not ever talk trash, right? And well, I probably didn't have reason to very often, but even on my best days when I was winning things in whatever country I was in, I didn't talk trash. I didn't rub it in. I tried to be incredibly humble about what I was doing. And so it's not really my style. And where I always look back is like Hayden Deegan. That's not my style. Kind of poking at people, telling people about, the things you're doing. Like that's not me. But my only prerequisite and the only thing I'll ask is, if you're going to do that, if that's going to be your MO, you have to back it up. Like, if you're going to run your mouth and you can't back it up, I have zero time for that. So in Hayden Deegan's case, in Jorge Prado's case, when he's done it here and there, I just kind of shrug my shoulders at it, because, hey man, if he's talking trash about you or you're racing against him and he's running his yapper, do something about it. If you can't do anything about it, don't come whining up. Don't whine to me, or don't whine in interviews about it, because you have every opportunity to, for lack of a better term, shut him up. And if you're not going to do it, probably just let him talk then, right? Like, I had a conversation with a established racer the other day in 450 class, and I was like, man, I don't think that's going to fly when he moves up, if he takes that aggressive of a stance, like with words. And he's like, there's no way. Like, there's no way. Not that he was saying he would do it, but guys like Jason Anderson, like, they're not going to stand for that. Like, you run your mouth about them, they will go to their, they'll go to their team and say, hey man, sorry, this weekend's probably not going to be a good one, because I'm going to make my mission in life to ruin this guy's weekend. Like, I'm just telling you right now, I apologize on the front end. Maybe the result's there, maybe it's not. I hope I don't crash in the process, but that guy's going down, right? And that's just how these are grown men. They're not going to suffer fools that way. They're just not going to do it. So I think that day is coming for. I don't mean to say that day's coming. I just think that it's going to have to be sorted out somehow. Like, Deegan's either going to stop, going at people directly with his words, or people are going to go at him with their motorcycles. Like, I think those are the two ways that thing sorts out. And he's really young. And I think there's, being young comes with immaturity. He'll grow out of that. What I'm most interested in as a fan and being entertained is he forced out of that by someone else, or does he learn it of his own accord to not take that course, right? Like, that to me is the most fascinating part of this. Is I want to see, does he figure it out on his own? It's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't do that. Or does someone show him that he really shouldn't do that? That's going to be, we're probably a year away from that dynamic. I don't know that any of these 250 guys are up for it. Maybe Hampshire, but they haven't proven that they kind of want to step into that arena just yet.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fascinating battle for sort of that ascendancy, isn't it? Yeah, like you said, Barsha and Anderson, those guys have no concerns putting someone in their place if it's warranted. So it'll be really cool to see play out. And I guess as we wrap this one up, mate, thanks again for taking the time. And what's the schedule, the week ahead looking like for you, mate? Any final thoughts? And the racing sort of doesn't really stop with the Aussie Supercross, Western Beach race. Those series were both really well run and executed. So it's still pretty busy, isn't it?
Yeah. Just, I'm trying to pay attention, but I'm also I'm trying to recharge the batteries a little bit too. Like for me, my work life doesn't stop. We have lots of things going on here at Fly Racing, lots of exciting things going on, honestly. But yeah, it's if I had to put a phrase on it, my focus shifts a little bit, right? Like normally I do my job at Fly Racing and I'm writing and talking all these things, and it kind of all happen in its own cadence. Well, now that I don't travel to the races on the weekends for a while, and I don't have these other distractions, I'm really locked in on my job here at Fly Racing, and I can really get caught up and be really proactive and get ahead of things. And so that's kind of fun. I don't have that opportunity most of the year. Like I'm usually on top of my game, but I can really lean into it and work on projects and start things that I had ideas. Like I have this idea board and I like look at it all the time. And I'm like, well, that would be cool to ever do one day. I can do it right now. Like I was working on something today I didn't know that I would even have time for. So those are, like nobody really cares. But for me, that's the most interesting and the most fun part about this time of the season is like I get to really kind of lock in on one thing instead of trying to manage 10, which is what the normal kind of status quo is.
Yeah, it's really awesome, mate. Definitely thanks again for taking the time. And yeah, it's probably nice to have more than, like you said, 2 or 3 days, at home before you're off to the next one. So before we sort of wrap this one up, we'll just thank the partners in 24MX, Dirt Store, Fuchs Silkaline, and Dragon Energy for all their incredible support. As without them, none of this would be possible. All right, thanks again, JT. It's been a ripper chat, mate. All the best, and we look forward to speaking again soon.
Thanks, Ed.
No worries, mate. Have a good one.